At 3:47 in the morning, the Desert Rose Diner hummed with the kind of silence that comes right before everything breaks. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a sickly white glow across the black and white checkered floor, buzzing like dying insects trapped in plastic. Outside, the November blizzard howled against the windows, visibility reduced to nothing but swirling white and the occasional red neon glow from the open sign that hadn't been turned off in 17 years. In the corner booth, 15 men in expensive black suits sat absolutely still. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. They sat like statues in a museum of power, their Italian leather shoes planted firmly beneath mahogany-colored table that had seen 1,000 deals made in whispers and blood. At the center of that booth sat Aleandro Caruso. 38 years old. 6'1". Shoulders that filled out his three-piece suit like the suit had been built specifically for him, because it had been, by a tailor in Milan who only took appointments through referral. His dark hair was slicked back from his forehead, revealing sharp angles and a jaw that looked carved from granite. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, thin and silver from age, the kind of scar that told a story he would never speak aloud. His hands rested on the table, one wearing a platinum wedding band that had no wife attached to it anymore, the other wrapped in a gold Rolex that cost more than most people's houses. Vinny sat to his right. Pietro to his left. Both men were built like walls. Both carried pistols in shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. Both had spent the last 15 years protecting Aleandro Caruso from the specific violence that tried to attach itself to men like him. The coffee in front of them had gone cold an hour ago. Then the bell above the door chimed. The sound cut through the diner like a blade through silk, and every single man turned toward the source of that noise with the trained instinct of predators who had learned never to miss an entrance. What stumbled through that door was a woman who looked like she had already been destroyed by something far worse than anything in that diner could offer. Nora Sinclair was 27 years old. Her blonde hair, the pale kind that catches light when the sun hits it right, was plastered to her face and neck, soaked through from the blizzard that continued to shriek outside. Her left eye was swollen completely shut, the skin around it a tapestry of purples and blacks that had started to yellow at the edges, which meant this beating was not fresh. This was 2, maybe 3 days old. Her right eye was open but hollow, the white shot through with burst blood vessels, the pupil dilated so wide it looked like someone had punched straight through her skull into the back of her brain. Around her throat were handprints. 5 fingers on each side, bruised into the pale skin like someone had tried to strangle the life out of her and had stopped just short of succeeding. Or had run out of time. Her cheap polyester work jacket, the kind with her name embroidered on it in crooked letters that read Nora, was torn at the shoulder. The tear exposed a scrape that had started to scab over, dried blood crusted along the wound. Her jeans were faded past any color they might have once been, with holes at both knees that had nothing to do with fashion and everything to do with how long she had been wearing them. Her sneakers were so worn that the tread was almost completely gone, and they squeaked against the diner floor as she walked, leaving wet footprints and small dots of blood that created a trail from the door to the counter. She was shivering. Not the kind of shivering that came from cold, though she was certainly cold, drenched in freezing rain and November wind. This was the shivering of a body that had learned to be afraid. The kind of shivering that came from deep inside the nervous system, from a place that understood, on a cellular level, that survival was not guaranteed. She collapsed against the counter. The ancient waitress standing behind it, name tag reading Doris, 72 years old, seen every kind of human tragedy in this diner for 40 years, immediately moved toward her. "Honey, you need a hospital. You need." But Nora was already fumbling in her pocket with shaking hands that looked like they belonged to someone 30 years older than her actual age. The hands were calloused. The fingernails were broken. There were fresh bruises on her knuckles as if she had tried to fight back and had failed. She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and exactly $34 in wrinkled bills. The paper was stamped with red ink. Final notice. The words screamed from the page in letters that seemed to vibrate with threat. Below that, a number. $125,000. A deadline 7 days away. An address that read Douglas Hale Collection Services in block letters. She placed the $34 on the counter. "Just coffee," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking at normal volume might shatter whatever was holding her together. "Black. No sugar. And please, I need to get home to my kids." Her one good eye closed for a moment, and when it opened again, there was something in it that made Doris look away. Something that spoke of nights without sleep. Of counting change for groceries. Of choosing between medicine and rent. Of being so tired that the world had started to look like a dream she might wake up from if she could just stay conscious long enough. In the corner booth, Aleandro Caruso's eyes had shifted from the men he had been speaking to, from the business of empire and territory and the careful mathematics of power that consumed his waking hours, to the woman now trembling against the counter. His lieutenants noticed immediately. They always noticed. They had been trained to read the smallest shifts in his attention the way sailors read the sky for storms. Vinny leaned in slightly, but Aleandro raised one finger. A single finger. That was all it took. Vinny stopped. Pietro stopped. Even the conversation at the adjacent table seemed to pause, as if everyone in the diner had suddenly become aware that something had changed in the air, though none of them could explain exactly what. Nora's hand shook as she lifted the coffee cup to her lips. The cup rattled against her teeth. Some of the coffee spilled. She didn't seem to notice. What she did not know was that she had just walked into the one place on earth where her nightmare carried weight. What she did not know was that the man in the corner booth had built his entire empire, his entire philosophy of power, on a single vow made 31 years ago in a basement in Naples. A vow that said, no child would ever suffer the way he had suffered. That anyone who preyed on the vulnerable, who used their power to destroy the small, who fed on desperation, they would face him. She did not know that she had just become the most important thing in Aleandro Caruso's world. But before any of that could unfold, before the machinery of his power could be set in motion, he watched her pull a small photograph from her other pocket. The photo was worn, folded and unfolded so many times that the creases had become permanent tracks. It showed two children, maybe 5 and 7, gap-toothed and smiling at a park somewhere. The little girl had blonde hair like her mother. The little boy had darker hair and he was holding a toy truck that had seen better days. Nora held that photograph for exactly 15 seconds. Just looked at it. Her entire body went rigid. Then she tucked it back into her pocket with the same care someone might use to place a wounded bird into a nest. The bell above the door chimed again. The blizzard had let up just slightly, enough that someone could see halfway across the parking lot. 3 figures in dark coats emerged from a black SUV, and they were moving with purpose. The men at the tables in the diner all went still at once. Nora didn't see them. She was staring into her coffee cup like it might contain an answer to a question she had stopped asking years ago. If this story touched your heart, please drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Share this with someone you love. Now let us go back, 3 days before this frozen night, to understand how a woman with $34 and 2 children at home became a target for the most dangerous predator in Las Vegas. 3 days before that frozen night, before the blizzard trapped her on the shoulder of the highway, before the black convoy found her bleeding and desperate, Nora Sinclair woke at 5:30 in the morning to the sound of her alarm clock, a battery-powered thing she had bought at a dollar store, its beep thin and pitiful in the darkness. The apartment was cold. The heater had not worked properly since November, and it was now mid-December. She could see her breath in the bedroom air. She pulled herself out of bed, her joints stiff, her body aching the way bodies ache when they have been used and never allowed to rest. Her alarm clock continued its small, desperate beeping. She silenced it. The apartment was a 2-bedroom on the east side of Las Vegas, in a complex where the paint peeled from the walls like dead skin, where the parking lot was cracked asphalt and broken dreams, where the families who lived here were the ones the city had decided were disposable. The wallpaper in the kitchen, if you could call it wallpaper and not just remnants of something that had once covered the walls, was a faded yellow with brown water stains blooming across it like flowers of decay. The linoleum floor buckled in places. The sink dripped. The single hot plate for cooking sat on a counter that had no space left, crowded with dishes waiting to be washed and containers of food that cost too much and never lasted long enough. Nora moved through the darkness to the children's room. Emma slept in the smaller bed, her blonde hair spread across a pillow that had seen better days, her mouth slightly open, her small chest rising and falling in the rhythm of innocent sleep. She was 6 years old. Tyler, 5, slept in a twin bed beside his sister, his darker hair matted against his forehead, a toy truck clutched in one small fist, a truck he had owned since he was 2, its paint chipped, its wheels worn smooth from 1,000 hours of play. Neither child stirred as Nora entered. She sat on the edge of Emma's bed and touched her daughter's forehead, just a brief contact, just enough to confirm that the child was warm and breathing and alive. This was her morning ritual, this small confirmation that they had survived another night. "Emma," she whispered. "Baby, it's time to wake up." Emma's eyes opened slowly, confused and blurry with sleep. She was wearing pajamas that had belonged to someone else first, hand-me-downs from Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter 2 years ago. They still fit, though the elastic around the ankles had stretched and loosened. "Mommy." Emma's voice was small, uncertain. "Come on, baby. School today. Up we go." Nora helped her daughter sit up, helped her swing her small legs over the side of the bed. Emma's feet were bare and blue-tinged from cold. Nora rubbed them, trying to warm them with friction, trying to give her daughter something resembling comfort before the day began. Tyler woke next, more resistant, burrowing deeper under his blanket. Nora had to lift him bodily from the bed, his small body warm and slack with sleep, and carry him to the kitchen where the cold air would shock him fully awake. The oatmeal was made with the last of the milk that was due to expire that day, milk that Nora had been rationing for 3 days. She mixed it with water to stretch it further, stirring the pot on the hot plate until the oatmeal thickened to a grayish consistency that was neither appetizing nor inexpensive. She divided it between 2 bowls. She did not eat. She never ate breakfast with the children. The logic was simple and mathematical: if she did not eat, there was more for them. Emma spooned the oatmeal into her mouth without enthusiasm, her eyes distant and tired in a way no 6-year-old should have been tired. "Mommy," Emma said, her voice small and careful. "Can I get new crayons for art class? Mine are all broken." Mrs. Patterson said, "We're doing a project." Nora's hands, which had been folding the children's clothes, the same 3 outfits rotating through the laundry every other day, went still. She did not look at her daughter. If she looked at Emma's face, at the hope in those small eyes, she would shatter. She had already shattered so many times that she was not sure there were any pieces left to break. "Not this week, baby," she said quietly. "Use the broken ones a little longer, okay? We'll see." We would not see. The money in her wallet was $34. $34 to last until Friday. Crayons cost $5 a box. Crayons were a luxury. Crayons were a dream. Crayons were the sort of thing that happened to children who had mothers with jobs that paid more than $9 an hour, mothers with apartments that did not leak, mothers who had not made the catastrophic mistake of trusting a man named Rico who borrowed $125,000 and disappeared like smoke. Emma nodded slowly, accepting this without argument, which was perhaps the saddest thing of all, that her 6-year-old daughter had learned not to ask for things, not to hope for things, not to believe that the world could possibly contain anything for her except survival and the constant, grinding knowledge that she was a burden on a mother who loved her desperately and could do nothing. Nora found Emma's only pair of clean socks at the bottom of the drawer, stuffed behind a sweater that no longer fit. The socks had a small hole in one heel, barely noticeable. She would have to darn it tonight if she had time, if she was not too tired, if her hands could manage the needle without shaking. She dressed them both. She braided Emma's hair, her fingers moving through the motions they had learned years ago when she was a different person, a person with a different life, a person who believed that her future would somehow diverge from her past. She tied Tyler's shoes, double-knotted them because he would try to pull them off at school and she could not afford a second pair. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. It was 6:15 in the morning, and the December air was sharp enough to cut. Nora wore her thin jacket, the same jacket she had worn since October, a grey thing that had never been warm and had only gotten thinner with time. Her hands turned red within the first block, the cold biting into her knuckles, her fingers going numb. Emma and Tyler walked on either side of her, their small hands in hers, their breath visible in small clouds in front of their faces. The bus came at 6:45. It was yellow and warm, and through the windows she could see other children from other families, other backgrounds, other universes where parents had money for school supplies and heat in their homes. She watched Emma and Tyler climb aboard, watched them find seats by the window so they could wave at her as the bus pulled away. She waved back, her numb hand rising and falling in an arc, until the bus turned the corner and they were gone. Then Nora turned and began walking in the opposite direction, toward the Sunset Towers office complex on the north side of the city, a 45-minute walk that she made 5 days a week. Her car, a 1998 sedan, something between grey and rust, sat in the parking lot of her apartment building where it had been sitting for 2 weeks. The engine had died. A mechanic had told her it would cost $1,600 to fix. $1,600 was a number so impossibly large that it might as well have been $1 million, might as well have been $1 billion. It existed only in the realm of fantasy, of things that would never happen, of futures that would never arrive. So she walked. The morning was still dark when she reached Sunset Towers, a 20-story office building of glass and steel that caught the rising sun and threw it back at the world in colors that seemed almost obscene. The building housed lawyers and accountants and insurance companies, places where people made decisions about money and life and death from behind desks that probably cost more than Nora's entire apartment. She entered through the service entrance, a door marked with a small brass plaque that might as well have said, "Invisible people only." The cleaning crew was already there, Mrs. Chen, who supervised the work, and 2 others, women whose names Nora had learned and then forgotten, women whose lives were as small and difficult as her own, women who moved through the building's hallways in the early morning before anyone important arrived, erasing evidence that anyone had ever been there. Mrs. Chen was kind. This was Nora's only advantage, that the woman who supervised her was not cruel. Mrs. Chen had once worked as an accountant in Taiwan, before her credentials meant nothing in America, before she had become a person who supervised the cleaning of other people's trash. She looked at Nora with something resembling sympathy. "More hours?" Nora asked, the question she asked every morning, the question to which the answer was always the same. Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Not this week. Budget freeze." "I'm sorry, Nora." Nora nodded. She did not let her face show anything. She picked up her supplies, the mop, the bucket, the rubber gloves that made her hand sweat, and began her work. 8 hours. She scrubbed toilets in the bathrooms on the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 15th floors. She emptied trash cans that contained things people had discarded without thought, coffee cups with lipstick stains, sandwiches wrapped in plastic, notes written and crumpled in frustration. She wiped down counters. She mopped floors until they reflected the fluorescent lights like mirrors. By noon, her back was screaming, her shoulders felt like they were held together by wire, and her hands were raw inside the rubber gloves. At 3 o'clock, she clocked out and began her walk to the elementary school. The afternoon sun was bright and cold and created long shadows on the sidewalk. She walked faster than the morning had allowed, knowing that Emma and Tyler would be standing outside the gates, waiting, their small faces turned toward the playground entrance, watching for her. This was not the arrangement. The arrangement was that they would go to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment after school, stay there until Nora could pick them up. But Nora always tried to arrive within 30 minutes of dismissal, always tried to minimize the time they spent wondering if she was coming back, if she had abandoned them the way their father had abandoned them, if the world would simply swallow her and leave them alone. She made it in 32 minutes. Emma was standing at the gate, holding Tyler's hand, both of them in their coats, both of them looking smaller and more fragile than any child should look. When Emma saw Nora, her face broke into a smile that contained so much hope and love and fear that Nora's vision blurred. "Mommy!" Emma called, and she released Tyler's hand and ran the small distance to Nora, colliding with her knees, wrapping her arms around her mother's legs. "You came back." I always come back, baby, Nora whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. Always. But that was a lie, or at least it was a promise she could not guarantee. She had learned that promises were dangerous things. They broke. They shattered. They left you standing in parking lots with 2 children and $34 in your pocket and a debt collector who had not yet started looking for you in earnest. They walked to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, a walk of 12 minutes through neighborhoods that the city preferred to forget. Mrs. Rodriguez was 73, a widow, kind, and expensive at $20 a week. Nora gave her 2 tens from her $34 reserve. She had now spent $30 this week on childcare alone. She had $4 remaining. For dollars. At 6:45 that evening, Nora left the apartment and walked to the Golden Mirage Casino, a journey of another 40 minutes, another walk through the cold December evening, another stretch of time in which her body was simply moving from one place to another, performing the motions of survival. The Golden Mirage was all neon and noise and the kind of artificial light that seemed to penetrate every cell of your body and leave you hollowed out. She entered through the employee entrance, showed her badge to security, and clocked in at 7 o'clock sharp. The executive floors were quieter in the evening. She mopped hallways and emptied trash cans in offices where men in expensive suits had left the detritus of their day, Scotch glasses with residue, documents marked confidential, photographs of families they were probably neglecting in the same way the world was neglecting her. At 9:30, as she was restocking paper towels in a bathroom on the 42nd floor, Marcus, the night security guard, appeared in the doorway. He was a large man, kind in a distant way, and he looked at her with something like pity, which was perhaps worse than if he had looked at her with contempt. "Nora," he said quietly. "That man was here again looking for you." Nora's hands went still. The roll of paper towels was frozen in her grip. "Douglas Hale," Marcus continued. "Says you owe him money. Says he's tired of waiting. He was here 3 hours ago, talked to the manager. Left a message for you. Said you got until Friday." The paper towel roll fell from her hands and rolled across the bathroom floor like a severed head. "What did the manager say?" Nora heard her own voice, thin and far away, coming from someone else's body. "Manager told him you weren't here." "But Nora, that man, is not someone who goes away easy. I've seen guys like that before." "He meant what he said." Nora moved to the sink. She gripped the edges with both hands. The room tilted. The fluorescent light above her head seemed impossibly bright, so bright that it was burning through her eyes into her brain, cauterizing her ability to think. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for telling me." Marcus left. Nora stood at the sink for 5 minutes, maybe 10, maybe longer. She was not tracking time anymore. Time had become something different, something with teeth, something that was hunting her and closing the distance every hour. At midnight, she clocked out and began the walk home. The streets at midnight were empty. The city that had seemed merely hostile during the day had become something else, a predator, a trap, a place where the rules had changed and she was not aware of the new game. She walked faster than she should have, her breath coming in sharp little gasps, her mind spiraling into territories it had learned to avoid. 2 months earlier, in a moment of weakness and loneliness, she had allowed a man named Rico into her life. He had been charming. He had brought flowers. He had told her that he loved her, that he wanted to build a future with her, that he was going to start a business and they would finally escape the poverty that had become their permanent condition. He had asked to borrow money. Not her money, she had none. But she had a good credit score from before everything had fallen apart, before her marriage had dissolved, before she had become a person who walked 45 minutes to clean offices for $9 an hour. She had signed documents Rico had assured her were standard, documents that he had presented to her in a legal office where everything had seemed legitimate and official and above board. The documents had been a loan for $125,000. Rico had promised it was for a business investment, for a restaurant, for something that would change their lives. She had signed. She had believed. She had allowed herself, for the space of a few weeks, to imagine a different future. Then Rico had gambled the money away in 3 weeks. Not in the casino, he was not that foolish. Online, at sites in countries that did not care if he was destroying another person's life. By the time she discovered what he had done, he was gone. An eviction notice appeared at their door. Collections agencies began calling. And then Douglas Hale had appeared. Douglas Hale was 52 years old. He was the kind of man you could see in any city, any country, any corner of the world where desperation met greed. He had graying hair that he kept very neat, maintained in a way that suggested he cared about his appearance, about projecting an image of control and discipline. He wore suits that cost more than Nora's apartment rent. He wore a gold watch that caught the light. He had cold eyes. She had first encountered him 3 weeks earlier, in this same parking lot at the Golden Mirage, as she was leaving her shift. She remembered the moment with the clarity of trauma. The parking lot had been nearly empty. Her dead car had been sitting in its spot, a monument to her failure. And Douglas Hale had approached her, moving with a confidence that suggested he had no doubt she would listen to him, that she would comply, that the world operated according to his will. Nora Sinclair, he had said. His voice was pleasant, almost gentle. This was what made it so terrifying, that he could threaten you while his voice remained mild, while his expression remained composed. You're on a document for a loan. $125,000. That loan was issued by my company. The loan needs to be repaid. I didn't borrow that money, she had said. My ex-boyfriend. Doesn't matter, he had interrupted. You signed the document. Your signature is on the line. That means you owe me. That's how the world works, Nora. Contracts. Obligations. Consequences. He had shown her the document. Her signature was there, in her own handwriting, at the bottom of the page. She had not read the fine print. There had been so much fine print. How much time do I have? She had asked. 2 months, he had said. 8 weeks to get me the money. After that, we have other arrangements. He had smiled when he said it. His smile was like a blade wrapped in ice, something that appeared beautiful until you realized it could cut you. She had asked what other arrangements meant. Women who can't pay their debts work for me, he had said. I have very wealthy clients who pay good money for certain services. Discreet arrangements. You understand? Or you could find a way to get the money. You've got 2 kids, don't you? He had known. He had known their names, their ages, their school. He had said it as a fact, but it had been a threat. The door to the threat was very thin, and she understood exactly what waited on the other side of it. Emma and Tyler, he had said. Sweet-looking children. Private school is very expensive. I wouldn't want anything to happen to them. She had felt her knees weaken. She had thought she might vomit. Now, 2 weeks later, walking home at midnight through streets that seemed to get darker every night, she knew that the clock was running out. Friday midnight. That was what Marcus had said. Friday midnight. She had 3 days. She did not have $125,000. She did not have $100. She had no plan, no strategy, no hope. What she had was her body, her children, and a debt that would consume everything. She reached the apartment at 12:48 in the morning. The building was dark except for a single light above the entrance. She climbed the stairs to her second-floor unit, inserted her key, and stepped into the cold darkness of her home. The children were asleep. Mrs. Rodriguez had fed them, put them to bed, left a note about what they had eaten. Nora paid her for the babysitting and watched the old woman leave, watched her disappear down the hallway, watched her vanish from the world of Nora's life. Then she sat in the darkness of her small apartment and felt the walls closing in. The bedroom door opens and Maria, Aleandro's housekeeper, enters carrying fresh bandages and antiseptic that smells sharp and clinical. Nora flinches at the sound of footsteps on the marble floor. The morning light cuts across the silk sheets like a blade, and she can see the Vega skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the storm finally breaking apart. "Your children are safe," Maria says softly in accented English, setting supplies on the nightstand. "The little girl, Emma, she is sleeping now. Her fever is gone. The boy, Tyler, he is eating breakfast in the kitchen. Mr. Caruso says you can see them soon." Nora nods but does not speak. The cashmere sweater against her skin feels impossible, soft in a way nothing in her life has ever felt. She touches her throat where the bandages wrap around the bruises, each one the shape of a man's fingers. The door opens again. Aleandro enters, still in his black suit, the fabric immaculate despite the hours that have passed. His dark eyes survey her with an intensity that makes her stomach tighten. Up close, she can see the scar running from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, a thin white line that speaks of violence survived. "You should eat," he says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath, each word measured and deliberate. "Your body is in shock. The brain does not function well without fuel." "Where am I?" Nora's voice comes out fractured, barely a whisper. "My home. The penthouse at the Caruso Tower." He sits in the chair across from her, maintaining distance. "Last night, my men found you on the highway. You were hypothermic, bleeding from facial trauma, and you were wearing the face of someone who had decided she was already dead. Then you walked into a diner at 3:47 in the morning and slapped the most dangerous man in Nevada across the face." He touches his cheek where the red mark has faded to pale pink. "Nobody has ever done that and lived to tell about it," he continues. "So the question becomes, what makes you different?" Nora's hands tremble. "I don't know who you are." "Aleandro Caruso." He lets the name settle. "I own this city. The casinos, the hotels, the streets. The men you saw last night, those are my lieutenants. 15 of the most loyal soldiers in Nevada. When you slapped me, every single one of them waited for me to give the order. They were ready to make you disappear." She swallows hard, pain shooting through her throat. "But I did not give that order," he says. "Because I saw something in your face. I saw someone who had nothing left to lose, and that kind of person is either the most dangerous thing alive or the most important." He stands and walks to the window. "Your children are 3 doors down. Emma has been asking for you since she woke. Tyler has not stopped talking about the man who said nobody would hurt his mommy anymore." Nora feels something break inside her chest. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody. I clean houses for people like you. I count pennies for my children's school supplies." Aleandro turns back to face her. "My father was a drunk who beat my mother until she stopped screaming. I was 7 years old, watching from inside a closet while he destroyed the only person who loved me. I clawed my way out of that neighborhood by becoming the thing I hated most, a man with power and no mercy. But I made a vow the day we buried her in a cemetery that had no flowers because we had no money for flowers. I swore that no child would ever suffer the way I suffered. Not if I had the power to stop it." He steps closer, and Nora realizes there are tears in his eyes. He blinks them away, the moment passing so quickly she almost believes she imagined it. Douglas Hale preys on desperate women. He takes their fear and turns it into profit. He uses their children as leverage. That makes this personal for me. Not business. Personal. The door opens and Emma runs in, Tyler close behind her. Nora's arms are open before she can think, and her daughter climbs into her lap, careful around her injuries. Tyler takes her hand, his small fingers gripping tight. "Mommy, the man said we're safe now," Emma says, her voice high and bright. "He said nobody will hurt you anymore." Nora closes her eyes and pulls her children close, feeling their heartbeats against her chest. When she opens her eyes, Aleandro is still watching from across the room. His expression is unreadable, but his men have told her later, in whispered conversation she will overhear, that in 15 years of working for him, they have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at her in that moment. After Maria takes the children to the kitchen, Nora tells Aleandro everything. She talks about Rico, her ex-boyfriend, whose name she signed to documents she never read. She describes the debt collector's letter, stamped final notice in aggressive red letters, sitting on her kitchen table like a sentence of death. $125,000, she says, and the number seems to take up all the air in the room. In 7 days. That's what Douglas Hale says I owe. And I have $34 to my name. 34. I walked to that diner last night in a blizzard because my car died and I cannot afford to fix it. I count pennies for Emma's school supplies. Last week I chose between buying milk or Tyler's asthma inhaler. I chose the inhaler, and we drank water for 3 days. Aleandro listens without moving. His hands rest on his thighs, palms open, a position of listening. Victoria Ashford called me at work yesterday, Nora continues. She remembered me from when I cleaned her estate once. She told me she knew people who could make the debt disappear. She told me to come to the Belmont estate at 8 in the evening, and she would help me. I was drowning, so I went. Nora's voice becomes smaller. Her house smelled like expensive perfume and wine. She wore white silk and diamond earrings that caught the light like they were on fire. She poured champagne and talked about travel opportunities, important clients, very lucrative arrangements. I understood what she was offering the moment she said it. She was delivering me to Douglas Hale. She was feeding me into his network. What did you do? Aleandro asks. I ran. I made it to my car, but the blizzard had already started. The engine wouldn't turn over. And then headlights appeared behind me, and I knew it was him. The silence that follows is thick and complete. Outside, Las Vegas hums with the sound of a city that does not yet know that everything is about to change. Douglas Hale dragged me a quarter-mile down the road, Nora says. He hit me across the face and I felt my eye socket explode with pain. Then he wrapped his hands around my throat and squeezed until I saw stars. When he released me, I fell into the snow, and he said, her voice breaks. He said that if I did not come to his warehouse by midnight tonight, he would visit my apartment. He would meet Emma and Tyler personally. Aleandro stands abruptly. He walks to the window and his shoulders tense like a man holding back a tsunami. When he turns back, his face is ice. Douglas Hale will never touch your children. He will never touch you again. This I promise. The bedroom door opens and Vinny enters, carrying a tablet. He is tall and broad-shouldered, his suit perfectly tailored, his expression serious. Boss, we have confirmation on everything. Douglas Hale operates out of a warehouse on the industrial east side. 12 women currently held there, confirmed through our sources. Victoria Ashford runs a charity foundation. Women come to her for help and they disappear. Pietro appears behind Vinny, a smaller man with scarred knuckles and the calm of someone who has seen violence and survived it. Hale's been operating for 6 years. 37 women missing. Police won't touch him because he has judges and a captain on his payroll. Aleandro's voice drops into a register that Nora has not heard before, a darker, colder, like thunder rolling across a desert. They are all about to become very interested in Douglas Hale. Vinny and Pietro exchange a look. In that look lives 15 years of loyalty, of following orders without question, of understanding that their boss operates by a code written in blood and honor. But this is something new. This is something they have never seen before. What are your orders? Vinny asks quietly. Contact Agent Rebecca Marsh at the FBI. Tell her we are ready to provide everything she needs. Tell her we move at dawn. Aleandro pauses. And tell her that Douglas Hale's debt collection ends tonight. The phone on the nightstand buzzes. An unknown number. Nora's hand shakes as she looks at it. Aleandro nods for her to answer. It is Victoria Ashford. Her voice is trembling, barely controlled. Nora, I know you are with him. I know Aleandro Caruso has you. I am begging you, tell him that I was just following orders. I was not supposed to, Douglas made me. Aleandro takes the phone from Nora's hand. His voice is quiet, but each word cuts like a blade. Victoria Ashford. You chose to hunt desperate women and deliver them into slavery. You chose to use your charity foundation as a trap. You chose to betray someone who needed help. You have 24 hours to turn yourself into the FBI, or I release documentation of every woman you have trafficked to every news outlet in Nevada. Your foundation, your reputation, your freedom, all of it ends. 24 hours. He ends the call. The silence that follows is absolute, complete, final. Outside, the blizzard breaks apart and the first rays of dawn touch the city. What happens now? Nora asks. Aleandro looks at her, really looks at her, and for a moment his carefully constructed mask slips away, revealing something underneath that is broken and healing simultaneously. Now, he says, justice arrives at dawn. The rain pounds against the penthouse windows like 1,000 accusations. Nora stands in the guest room at 2:27 in the morning, watching the city lights blur and scatter beneath the storm. Her hands are shaking. Not from cold, though the November air seeps through the glass and settles in her bones like a curse she cannot shake. The shaking comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere that has learned, over 27 years of survival, that safety is temporary and kindness is a trick played by people who have never known desperation. Emma and Tyler sleep in the room next door. She had checked on them 14 times since midnight. 14 times she had stood in their doorway and counted their breaths, watching the rise and fall of their small chests, confirming again and again that they were still here, still safe, still hers. But the safety is borrowed. Everyone knows it. The FBI raid happened at dawn, but Douglas Hale's reach extends further than any warrant, any jail cell, any prosecutor with a federal badge can contain. Men like him do not disappear because of paperwork. They simply wait. They plan. They send messages through intermediaries and untraceable phone calls and women who show up at your door with instructions and threats. She presses her forehead against the cold window. The rain is ice against her skin when she opens the balcony door and steps outside, letting the downpour soak through the borrowed clothes, through the layers of security Aleandro's penthouse provides. Below, Las Vegas stretches in a sea of neon and shadow. Millions of people sleeping in warm beds, sleeping without checking their children's breathing, sleeping without the weight of a $125,000 debt hanging over them like the lid of a coffin. Somewhere down there is a woman like her. Maybe 2. Maybe 10. Still counting dollars, still skipping meals, still trading sleep for the chance that tomorrow brings something different than today. The rain tastes like salt and ash. She grips the balcony railing and thinks about how simple it would be to stop fighting. How peaceful, even, to let the rain wash everything away. If she walked into that storm and did not come back, Emma and Tyler would be safer. The state would raise them. Kind people might raise them. People with jobs and stability and nothing to lose. They would forget about her eventually, the way children do, her face fading into something soft and forgetful. That would be kinder than living under the shadow of her failures, raised by a mother who cannot protect them, cannot feed them on anything but fear and poverty and the sound of knocking that means danger. A small voice pulls her back. Mommy. Emma stands in the doorway, 4 years old and drowning in the oversized pajamas Aleandro's housekeeper provided. She holds a stuffed bear with one ear hanging by a thread, and her eyes are wide with the particular worry that children develop when they learn the world is not safe. Nora has seen that look in her daughter's eyes more times than any mother should witness in a lifetime. Why are you in the rain? Emma asks. The question is simple. Literal. A 4-year-old's observation of fact. But it carries the weight of everything unspoken between them, the understanding that her mother is breaking apart, that something inside Nora is fracturing, and that Emma knows it even though she cannot name it. Nora walks back inside, soaking wet, and pulls Emma into her arms. She holds her daughter until the small body goes limp, until the worried breathing deepens into sleep, until Nora's own heartbeat slows from panic into something almost resembling peace. She stays there on the guest room bed, holding Emma, until the darkness outside begins to lighten toward gray, toward the first hint of dawn. At 5:15 in the morning, Aleandro's phone rings. Vinny's voice is quiet and controlled, the way it always is when violence is happening in the background. Both locations are secure. The FBI has 47 people in custody across the two sites. Douglas Hale is in federal transport heading to detention. Victoria Ashford surrendered at her home without resistance. Aleandro does not respond immediately. He stands at the window of his private office, watching the storm break apart as the sun begins its rise. The sky shifts from black to deep purple to bruised grey. The women, he asks. 12 at the warehouse. 7 at Victoria's mansion. 3 are from the initial trafficking ring. Medical teams are with them now. Agent Marsh says some will testify. And Hale. Arraignment is scheduled for this afternoon. Bail has been denied. The federal prosecutor is recommending consecutive sentences on multiple counts. Douglas Hale will spend 40 years in federal prison minimum. His empire is finished. The phone goes silent except for the sound of rain. Send the documentation to her attorney, Aleandro says. Everything the FBI uncovered shows the debt was fraudulent, enforced through coercion and threat. Any signatures she provided under duress are null. Already done. Her name appears nowhere in the financial records except as a victim. The prosecutor's office has confirmed it. Aleandro ends the call. He stands in the silence of his office, in the penthouse that costs more per month than Nora earned in a year on her previous job, and he allows himself exactly one moment of something that might be called feeling. Somewhere in this city, Douglas Hale is being processed through the federal system. His lawyers are being contacted. His assets are being frozen by court order. His network is being dismantled by men and women in FBI windbreakers who know exactly which threads to pull. Justice, in the end, was not beautiful or poetic. It was bureaucratic and methodical and absolutely devastating because it was permanent. He finds Nora in the guest room. Emma sleeps between her and the wall. Nora's eyes are open but unfocused, the way they become when exhaustion reaches a point where sleep becomes impossible. Her clothes are soaked from standing in the rain. There are dark circles under her eyes that no amount of rest will erase, because what causes those circles is not simple tiredness but the accumulated weight of survival. Aleandro sits on the edge of the bed without speaking. He does not touch her. Not yet. Sometimes the most powerful communication is the simple fact of presence, the silent message that someone is choosing to stay, choosing to witness, choosing not to abandon you to the darkness that threatens to consume you. It's over, he says finally. Douglas Hale was arrested at 5:38 this morning. Victoria Ashford surrendered to federal agents. 12 women were rescued from the warehouse. 7 from Victoria's property. The FBI has evidence for federal prosecution on 17 separate counts. Nora does not respond immediately. She stares at Emma's sleeping face, at the rise and fall of her daughter's breathing, at this child who will never know the world that Nora had assumed was inevitable for her. When Nora speaks, her voice is barely a whisper, like a candle in the wind that might blow out at any moment. 40 years. Minimum. That is before sentencing. The federal prosecutor recommended consecutive sentences, which could extend the total substantially. And Victoria will face trial on separate charges. Conspiracy to commit human trafficking, wire fraud, racketeering. Her charitable foundation has been shut down. Her assets are frozen pending civil forfeiture. The women she recruited are already cooperating with investigators. Nora's legs give out, though she is already sitting. Her body folds in on itself like a flower closing against the cold, and she begins to cry. Not the tears of sadness but the tears of relief so complete and overwhelming that her body shakes with the force of it. She cries without sound, her mouth open, her entire form trembling. Aleandro moves to hold her, but carefully, asking without words if he is allowed to touch her, if she wants the weight of someone else's presence or if she needs the sharp solitude of grief that comes when the thing you have been afraid of finally, actually stops. She reaches for him. He pulls her against his chest, his hand cradling the back of her head, his body sheltering hers in the way that only another human can. They sit that way in the pre-dawn darkness, Nora crying and Aleandro holding her, while Emma sleeps between them, unaware that her mother's entire world has just shifted on its axis. When her breathing finally steadies, Aleandro speaks into the top of her head. "You are safe now. Your children are safe. Douglas Hale is in federal custody and will remain there. No one will ever collect that debt. No one will ever threaten you again." But what Nora does not know was that Aleandro had already transferred $125,000 into a bank account in her name. That he had contacted a friend who owns a residential property management company about a position with benefits and flexible hours that would pay 3 times what she had earned cleaning houses. That he had arranged for her damaged sedan to be repaired and delivered to the parking garage of the penthouse building. That he had done these things not for the satisfaction of power but because watching her break apart was like watching something sacred be destroyed, and he could not allow that. He does not tell her any of this yet. Not because he is hiding something from her, but because right now, in this moment, she needs to understand one thing above all else, that survival is over, and living can finally begin. The morning news shows the footage. Douglas Hale being led from the warehouse in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face moving through shock to rage to something that might be fear. Victoria Ashford being escorted from her mansion in designer pajamas, her social mask finally shattered. The 12 women being guided to ambulances, wrapped in emergency blankets, their faces showing the particular mix of trauma and relief that comes when the thing hunting you is finally captured. Within 3 hours, the story has spread across every local news outlet in Nevada. By afternoon, national news is picking it up. By evening, the rescue makes headlines in cities 5,000 miles away from Las Vegas. A human trafficking ring dismantled. A predatory loan shark arrested. A wealthy woman exposed as a conspirator. Justice arriving not through vigilante violence but through federal law enforcement, through systematic investigation, through the slow and grinding machinery of the legal system that, in this rare and beautiful moment, actually works. Nora watches the news from Aleandro's living room, her children asleep on either side of her. She recognizes some of the women being interviewed, victims who had passed through the same rental property where Hale had collected payment, some of whom had warned her in urgent whispers what happened to women who could not pay. What happens now, she asks Aleandro, who stands at the window watching the city wake up to the knowledge that 2 of its darkness dwellers have been dragged into the light. He looks at her, really looks at her, and for a moment his carefully constructed mask slips away, revealing something underneath that is broken and healing simultaneously. Something that looks, for just an instant, like hope. "Now," he says, "you finally get to live." 1 year later, the screen fills with golden light breaking through floor-to-ceiling windows. Las Vegas sprawls below, a city transformed in Nora's eyes, no longer a place of predators but of possibility. She stands at her desk in a penthouse office on the west side, her posture straight, her navy-tailored dress fitting perfectly, her hands steady as they move across documents. This woman bears the same face as the one who stumbled into a diner with a swollen eye, but everything else has changed. Her hair falls in waves, styled with intention. Her nails are clean, no longer broken from scrubbing other people's bathrooms. On the wall behind her, 3 framed photographs tell the story of a year's transformation, Emma and Tyler in private school uniforms, both grinning with the particular joy of children who have stopped being afraid. Nora cutting a ribbon at her own small office, a consulting firm that helps single mothers navigate legal systems, financial aid, housing laws. The women she serves sit in that waiting room every day, and they see her and think, if she survived that, maybe I can survive this too. Her phone rings. The school calling to confirm she will attend Emma's art show tomorrow. "I will be there," Nora says, and her voice carries no anxiety, only certainty. She owns her time now. She owns her choices. The refrigerator, when we see it, is full, fresh vegetables, milk that will not expire before she can use it, 3 backup inhalers for Tyler's asthma because she never wants to choose again between medicine and rent. The children's rooms overflow with books and toys and furniture that will last years instead of weeks. In her office, hanging beside her degrees and certificates, is a single item framed in simple wood, the final notice letter. Not hidden away. Displayed. A permanent reminder of the woman she was and the woman she refused to remain. As evening falls and the city bleeds gold and purple across the sky, Nora steps onto the penthouse balcony. The breeze is warm, carrying the sound of distant traffic, the faint hum of the city settling into night. She thinks about the headlines from 3 months ago. Douglas Hale sentenced to 42 years in federal prison. No parole. His empire dismantled, his victims finally believing they were safe. Victoria Ashford received 33 years, her social standing erased, her name now synonymous with cruelty and conspiracy rather than charity galas. Both of them lost everything. But what occupies Nora's mind as she stands alone on this balcony is not her enemy's destruction, it is the man who made it possible, and whom she has not seen in 11 months. Aleandro Caruso. After the arrests, everything was handled through his assistant. Job training. A stipend. Introductions to people who could help her build something legitimate. She assumed he had moved on, his conscience eased, back to his dangerous world. She assumed the man in the corner booth had been a moment of mercy, nothing more. Then she hears footsteps behind her. Measured. Unhurried. She turns. Aleandro stands in the doorway, still in his black suit, still carrying that particular gravity that makes the air around him feel heavier. But there is something different in his face, a weariness that goes deeper than exhaustion, a softness around his eyes that was not there before. Their gazes meet and hold for a moment that stretches like pulled taffy. "How did you get up here?" Nora asks. "I own the building." "Of course he does." A surprised laugh escapes her. "I did not know. The property manager never mentioned." "I asked him not to," Aleandro says, stepping onto the balcony but maintaining distance between them, as if he is not sure he has the right to close it. "I wanted you to feel this was yours. Not something I gave you. You did give it to me. All of this. The job, the connections, the money to restart." She pauses. "I know it was you, even though you never said." Aleandro looks out at the city, his jaw tight. "You earned it. You took the opportunity and built something real. That was not me. Why did you disappear?" The words come out sharper than she intended. He is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is rough, like it has been damaged by silence. "Because I did not want you to feel obligated. I did not want you to rebuild your life thinking you owed me something. I wanted you to be free." Nora steps toward him. "And now? Why are you here now?" Aleandro turns to face her fully, and for the first time since she has known him, the carefully constructed mask slips away completely. What remains is devastatingly human, broken and healing simultaneously, like a man learning to breathe after being underwater for years. "I came because I needed you to know the truth," he says. "When you walked into that diner with blood on your face and defiance in your eyes, something broke inside me. I have spent my entire adult life building walls, controlling everything, trusting no one. I told myself I helped you because of my vow about children, because of my mother, because it was the right thing to do. But that was not the whole truth." He steps closer, close enough that she can see the silver threads running through his dark hair, the scar on his cheekbone catching the fading light like a blade. "The whole truth is that saving you saved me too," he continues. "For 15 years, I lived in darkness, doing things I justified as necessary, becoming the kind of man people fear. I was still defined by my father's shadow, still living like violence was the only language I knew. But when you slapped me in front of my men, you did something nobody else ever dared, you treated me like I was just another man who could hurt you. And you chose defiance anyway. That courage reminded me what strength really looks like." Nora's eyes glisten. "You think you needed redemption? Aleandro, you saved my children. You took down a monster who destroyed dozens of lives. You are not your father. I know that now. Because of you." He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small box, velvet worn from carrying, from being held too many times. "I have carried this for 11 months. I did not know if I had the right to give it to you. I did not know if you would even want to see me again. The box opens to reveal a ring, not ostentatious, not designed to prove wealth, but crafted with such precision that light moves through it like water. It is a ring that says, I chose you. I see you. I will not leave. I am not asking you to answer tonight, Aleandro says quietly. I am asking you to let me try. To let me be the man who runs toward you instead of away from you. I have already begun divesting from the darker parts of my business. Working with federal law enforcement to dismantle trafficking networks across 3 states. Using my resources to fund legal aid for women in situations like yours. I will never be a good man, Nora. But I am trying to be a better one. And I want to try with you beside me. Nora reaches out and takes the box from his hands. She looks at the ring, then at his face. Emma called from inside, Mom, is someone here? Nora calls back, yes, baby. An old friend. She looks at Aleandro. Would you stay for dinner? Emma has been taking cooking classes. She is good. Aleandro's smile, when it comes, is unguarded and real. I would like that. The camera pulls back as they walk inside together, the penthouse warm with light, the sound of children laughing. 2 people who survived terrible things, now choosing to build something better from the wreckage. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is not to save someone, but to give them the tools to save themselves. Redemption does not come from the life we were born into, but from the choices we make when we have the power to become something better. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to see more stories about courage, redemption, and the unexpected places we find hope. Drop a comment telling us, what would you do if you had one chance to change your life? We will see you in the next story.